Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. You know, at SchoolRubric, we are really passionate and excited about connecting with educators all across the world in an international education. In fact, many of us, myself included, lived and worked in international schools for over a decade. We are pleased to have with us today one of the preeminent international school organizations, ECIS, otherwise known as the Educational Collaborative for International Schools. They were founded in 1965, and just to give you an idea of the expanse and the reach they have, they represent 500 membership communities, 65,000 plus educators on 80 countries and 6 continents. So I want to help welcome and give a warm welcome to some of their key stakeholders with us today. We have with us Kam Chochan, Sarah Kupke, and Jim Ellis. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, well, let's jump right into it. I'd love to maybe pass the baton around before we get into our discussion, learn a little bit more about each one of you, and then kind of what you've been doing and your role at ECIS. Kam, let's start with you.
Hello. Thank you, Wallace, for inviting us to this very exciting broadcast with yourselves. So I've been with ECIS for 4 years now, and I've been executive director for just about 2 years now. So we've had to do lots of changing through the pandemic so that we could offer our communities what they needed. So that included going far more online and having an inclusive approach to what we were offering to our community and developing really strong relations with them, because we haven't been able to see anybody for nearly 3 years now.
Kam, welcome, and thank you for being here. Let me pass it over to Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Wallace, and thanks for the invitation to talk today. Yes, my name's Sarah Kupke, and I live in the south of Germany. I have been in international education for 3 decades, previously in Great Britain, and then I've been living in Germany for the second half of my life. I recently discovered that remembered that my first presentation at an ECIS conference was in 1993. So I have been a consumer and a participant in ECIS for many years, but I've actually been working now with ECIS for the last 6 months. Since September, I took over the role of head of professional learning. Yeah, it's probably enough for now. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah, for being here. And what a great history that you have with ECIS as a consumer and now kind of working on the other side. Right. Jim, let me pass it over to you. You and I have interacted before with some of the things with SchoolRubric, and I am pleased to see now that you are bringing your talent and expertise to ECIS.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you and I did some stuff with SchoolRubric together, I was consulting and a teacher at the time, and I'm a little bit of a teacher still, and still now working with ECIS as well, creating new student-centered programming and some other stuff with ECIS as well. It's been a real pleasure to work with you, Wallace, SchoolRubric, and most definitely ECIS.
Excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about ECIS. Kam, you already talked a little bit about the necessary adaptations that ECIS has had to go through as a result of the pandemic. But I just wanted to pose a question to the group here in terms of ECIS. Where has it been? Where is it now? And where is it going? I realize this is a pretty broad and big question, but I think that's why we're here, to answer big questions and really think intently about the future of education. What is your perspective at ECIS?
So where it's been. So as I've been here the longest, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So we used to be an organization that was joint with CIS. And then we separated from them about 15 years ago now. And we were then before we separated from CIS, we were just a European organization. We were the European
Council. Yeah.
European Council of International Schools. But then we decided we needed to be much more global. Our membership was growing. People from other countries wanted to join. And we felt we couldn't be inclusive if we were just based in one region. And actually our membership now is in 82 countries. You know, it grows all the time. So that's a little bit of where we've been. So we were a membership organisation, and members paid a price, and then they got lots of professional development with us. So that's what happened. We, about 5 years ago, just about as I was joining the organisation, we re-looked at our membership. So it was no longer a pay to play in the club. You actually got free courses with that membership, and child protection training, things that schools actually needed. So we added a value proposition. So we did that. So that's a little bit about where we were and where we're moving to. As you can see, we're a really global team. I'm based in London, Jim is in Austria, Sarah is in Stuttgart. We do what we say we'll do, so that we have lots of different perspectives. We've been thought leaders since 1965, and we continue to do that. But the other thing we're really doing, we're really engaging with our community. We have a massive listening project, and we're not just focusing on the heads of schools. Like Jim said, we're now doing a student-led program. We've got a middle leader program. We want to look after every stakeholder, and what we don't want to offer is any silver bullet PD. We want to offer a journey. So whatever training you do with ECIS, you'll have an opportunity to connect with the facilitators and make sure that learning continues. We talk about lifelong learning all the time, and everything we do represents that lifelong learning. Please do feel free to add, my friends.
Yeah, I'll jump in then with from the perspective of professional learning, because I think you've covered it all really, Kam. But just to go into a little bit of detail now with the professional learning, I think the very nature of it has changed, and we'll perhaps talk about that a little bit later. What the last couple of years have done to have an influence on the nature of professional learning. But I think one of the hallmarks of ECIS is this personal involvement that, rather contrary to what used to happen many years ago, where we had huge conferences where there'd have been sort of 2,500 delegates, and you'd have seen those star speakers down on the stage, beautifully floodlit, and it was all rather impressive, but you wouldn't dare to go anywhere near those gurus of the education world and actually talk to them afterwards. I think what's definitely happened is that this very personal nature of the organization, however big it is and however impressive the history is, what member schools really appreciate is the fact that they will get a phone call from us to find out how they're doing, not to chase up on their fees. They will be able to talk to the facilitators one-to-one. They will be able to go to conferences now where we have smaller numbers of people working really intensively together in subject-based groups. So I think that very personal nature means that it also gives it a kind of a bespoke nature to that training. It means that there's a continuity, there's a sustainability, there's enduring learning going on, and that's transformative. And that's really, really important to us, that we're not talking about education, we're planning to change what we're doing.
Jim, I'd love to hear a little bit from you as the head of innovation, because I know when you hear change what we're doing, that must be very resonating to you.
Yeah, I would say so. It's amazing how much of our internal dialogue is really about the evidence that we're bringing from our conversations with our schools, and how we are truly listening to our member schools, their needs, and what's going on. And so to be a part of that process, or facilitate some of it, or make some on my own, or watch other of my wonderful colleagues at ECIS make some of that change happen, because we believe that that's what a school needs, is one of the most important reasons for my work to exist, or our work collectively to exist. And it really is reframing the organization around what schools want and need. So it's a really refreshing time to be a part of it. It's also probably the most challenging when you look at the pandemic, the changing landscape of international schools, DEIJ. I would say the majority of our work has meaningfully shifted, and to participate in that process, man, I got to tell you, it's been a real treat, but a challenge too. So I think we understand that we're undertaking significant change, and that it's hard, but I think we all rest at night because we know it's meaningful.
Yeah, one of the things that really is resonating with me, a couple of things, but one of the things that you just mentioned, Jim, and I think others as well, is that you are really attempting to pick up the phone or, establish contact and outreach to some of these membership schools. You've had some listening session, it appears. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you might share about some of the data, some of the feedback that you've gathered in terms of what schools are looking for, what schools are needing, what schools are looking for in terms of support from an organization such as ECIS?
I'll start. I think I have less than the rest, but I'll pitch my new thing as a result. I think when a group of schools gets together to do something bigger than what they could have done by themselves, you start to see the real magic of an organization like ours. Our student-led service learning program that we're about to launch is going to be a student-led high school student-aged, secondary school-aged conference that they will lead. And that's a huge investment on our part in partnering with ISL London and schools all over the world as we begin to launch this, so that students can actually lead their own conference about creating two-way partnerships with within their service projects. We're super excited about it because we know that fundamentally this is something that many schools cannot do by themselves at all. And it brings people together, communities together, schools together, service partnerships together with refugees is a main focus of ours. So to be able to do something bigger together that's meaningful for our world, that's meaningful for our students, and that's meaningful to the lives of the professionals who are committing years of their service to these international schools and giving them something great to work on. All of these things are happening because we're working together and that we're bravely attempting something that is not easy to do. So our investment in this particular project is where a lot of that value comes from for me. And it came through these things that we're hearing schools say that they want to do. And I know that just as interesting, Sarah and Kam, you guys have feedback and actions that we're working on too.
Yeah.
Sarah, Kam, anything to share from your takeaways from some of these listening sessions that you've participated in?
So one of the key things that schools are looking for is connections. It can feel very lonely. So one of the very big areas we work in is child protection. We're the founder members of the International Task Force for Child Protection. So that's one of the big areas we work in. And what we do, we bring together the designated leads for child protection. It's a really lonely place to be in a school, but we have about 150 people that join us probably every month to get more up-to-date training, because nobody wants to feel like they're the only people in the school doing it and there's no one to go to. And those connections are really important because they all join and then they say, oh, well, I've had that problem, and they don't feel so alone. So it's really supportive as well, what we offer, which is really key. And also, we'll talk to lots of our heads. So I've been doing some closed heads groups through the pandemic where the heads can come together and say, everyone looks to me to what to do. But actually, this is the first pandemic I've lived through as well, as it is for all of us. And then they will talk between themselves and think, well, actually, we could do this or do this. And that's what we've done. And just to give you a little bit of an overview, so through the pandemic, actually, our involvement with ECIS has grown about fourfold. So before the pandemic, we had just under 1,000 people probably attend workshops and things with us. But since the pandemic, we're nearly on 3,000. But that's because it's helped us in many ways with our middle leader courses. Actually, delivering them virtually is really wonderful because you have the same facilitator over a longer period of time. So if we say, you could do this, and they suggest things to the learners, they can go away, practice them, come back the next week and say, actually, you said the thing, it doesn't work. And then that learning goes on. They can say, well, actually, we meant it like this. So we've learned some really valuable lessons. And what we've done, if schools need something, we will provide it. Jim and I delivered a day at St. George's in Luxembourg for the whole staff on diversity and inclusion. But we didn't charge for it because it's work that's really important for us and it's meaningful. So we're very flexible in what we do, and we will always put the school needs first, as long as obviously we can be a viable organisation. So I think that's very different about us. We will flex to the school's needs and what they need and provide those things.
I think that agile thinking and that agile reacting is really an important part of what you're talking about there, Kam, because the connections that you're talking about are the networking that we do. And so through the listening, there are heads of schools, as Kam's just described, around the world who are feeling quite lonely because they haven't been able to have the connections, and we can put people in touch with one another. There are other people who aren't particularly lonely at all, and they've been working on various different things that they want to be able to expand, and we can do that for them. We're like the gatekeeper. We're like that. I talk about being the ferry lady. My great grandmother was a ferry woman. She used to have a long pole and she used to take the ferry across the river, and the people on that side needed to get to this side, and the people on this side needed to get to that side. And there were all sorts of exchanges that happened while they were sitting in their boat. And that's what we're like. We are all about bringing people together. So there are different needs in different parts of the world at the moment. And I mean, this part of Europe is in its own particular traumatic state at the moment, but it hasn't negated the fact that that's also happening in other parts of the world. And that we're there with and for schools. We're going the journey with them. So this is really important, this sort of connectivity, this role that we can play in helping people to be able to come together, get organizations involved in being able to work with trauma management and crisis management. And then the actual trainings that we do, the courses that we do, the conferences and the events that we have are almost like professional learning communities. As Kam was mentioning, we come together, we talk about the theory, we think about our experiences that we put into practice in schools. We go back into the field and try things out, and then we can come back and discuss them again. It isn't just ended at the end of a training and if it was all good, but you go back into your default behaviors again on a Monday morning. It helps people to be in touch with one another. We have, for example, with our middle leaders courses, we have 8 different courses that people can take part in, but they need to have 4 in order to get their certification. We had a feedback from somebody the other day who said, I've done all 8 now. I know I've got my certificate, but I've done all 8 now. Can you roll out some other ones as well? Because it's just so helpful coming to them.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great feedback. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of the course offerings and maybe transition a little bit. It's interesting because a lot of the international school organization I'm familiar with, I used to be an international school director in Africa. And so there was ISA, which is the Association of International Schools in Africa. And that was a really useful group to be together with. But one of the things I always struggled with was thinking about, well, there's a lot of schools and directors in Northern Africa. They're actually physically closer to Europe than they are to Johannesburg, which is a lot of, where the physical conference was. And I think the pandemic has taught us that borders really aren't that important.
Yeah.
I think it's taught us that, really connecting, and we're actually going through a lot of the same things in schools and communities across the world. So I did want to ask a little bit more. Let's go a little bit deeper on some of the hybrid and diverse offerings to meet some of the needs of these schools and communities across the world. And more importantly, what does this look like post-COVID? We've been thinking a lot about, well, we had to be virtual because it was virtual, because of the pandemic. But now that we've had some opportunities to really think about it and think about what works, what doesn't work, what resonates, what doesn't, what does that model look like from ECIS's point of view?
So there's a couple of things that you said. So we work with ASA as well. I work with a lot of the association directors. We're a little bit different because we're a global membership. So we were the first people to go online conferencing when the pandemic first hit, and we're one of the first to go back to face-to-face. So next week will be our first leadership conference that will be face-to-face in St. Albans, and we've actually sold out about 2 months ahead of schedule. What the hybrid version will look like for us, we will never go back to fully face-to-face because we have members in Botswana, Bangladesh. So we will record sessions and share them online because we want to be fully inclusive. We want everyone to have access to the same opportunities. So we will do that in the world that goes back. We'll do face-to-face things, but we'll also do online. Nobody that attends a face-to-face will get an advantage over what we can offer, online as well. We will be inclusive in what we offer. So we are, again, shifting to where we can go, because I'm in the UK and you can do whatever you like here. There's no COVID anymore. You don't even have to stay at home if you have COVID. It's a little bit ridiculous, but that's why we're having the conference here in the UK, because there's very little restrictions. And we'd planned to do that about 18 months ago. And we're also doing it jointly with NEASC, because I really believe that heads of schools and people shouldn't have to keep shifting from one event to the other where we have similar speakers. Let's start coming together and being more collaborative in what we offer, so that they can come to an ECIS conference, they can get their PD from us, they can get accreditation information from NEASC. We've also got IB there that can help with curriculum. Let's try to get things together so that it's much easier for people to travel out and get those trainings and go home and share them with their team.
Just to go back to the hybrid, I hope I didn't miss that. I'm sorry, I dashed out quickly. It is interesting how, particularly with the middle leadership, a couple of our facilitators were very clear at the beginning of the pandemic that it simply wasn't going to work being online and working with cohorts, because it's different to being in 2 days intensive time together, and this simply wasn't going to work. Those same facilitators are saying they really love the idea of getting back and being face-to-face together, but actually, in terms of the effectiveness of what they're doing online, it's almost better.
Yeah,
because of this nature of going from week to week. And then just to tell the story from the perspective of the participants on these courses, we have people cross continents, and so we've got the time zone issues. There are people in schools in China who go to bed in the evening and then get up in the middle of the night to attend a webinar, a 1-hour webinar. As astounding as that may sound, we had a Women in Education webinar where somebody in China said there was a thunderstorm outside and it woke me up. So I thought, oh, good, I can go to the webinar at 2 o'clock in the morning. These are extreme cases, but there was somebody on a course last week, one of our middle leaders courses, and she was traveling at the time. So she was in Dubai airport with her little hearing aids in and participating in the course. People are really keen to be able to participate and contribute and gain from the professional learning that's possible for them. And this hybrid or at least this online facility means that it really opens up the possibilities for people to be able to come together, and they get to know each other. You have people who've been on courses, and then they're saying, hello, so-and-so, hello, so-and-so, and they're communicating with each other through the social media. They're communicating with each other in the courses themselves because of the relevance of what they're talking about, what they're learning about, and what they're actually going into schools to do and wanting to be able to share that.
Yeah, I think it's all about meeting those teachers and, those educators where they are. Some people prefer the face-to-face interactions, but I think there's increasingly more folks who are interested and available and have the disposition to attend a webinar or attend something in a hybrid format, or attend something on their own time, whether it's watching a recording later. Jim, what has been some of your impressions in some of the stuff that ECI has put out in terms of format that has really resonated with folks?
A lot of the stuff that we've already heard so far, I think that the best people that we have through Zoom or something similar that are creating highly interactive, very pertinent sessions are really sticking with it. We've passed through that phase of screen exhaustion into this space where people will do things because it's meaningful. And when we have meaningful and critical, fresh lessons and in courses or sessions that are one-offs or whatever, you get the people waking up in the middle of the night in China to do it. Internally, we've the three of us and our entire organization has absolutely needed to become experts of time zones. When we were a truly global organization, but we really did things in person, time zones weren't as critical. I now know, for example, I'm meeting China at about 7 a.m. where I am. I'm meeting Europe in the evenings, and then I have sort of a few different time zones between Asia and here that can sprinkle throughout my day. And so my world is broken up across my day. And I know that internally that those are some of the mechanisms that have had to change to make some meaningful things happen, whether it's running something for the Asian network that we have, which we've recently done with our middle leader certificate, our cafes. You know, globalization is meaning new things for us, and we're changing dramatically as we do it. And people are responding to that because they're seeing us sort of change and point towards them in an authentic way. And when they know that they're being seen and they're being heard, they respond. And so it's changing how we work, but it's impacting how they receive our efforts.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that you are talking about how ECIS made the pivot more than a decade ago to become a global organization. And yet you are still learning and still adapting and still being receptive to, teacher and educator needs. And I think that's, I think it would have been pretty difficult to accept that a global organization would really be able to individualize and be able to address individual educator and individual school needs. But it seems like that's exactly what you are attempting to do and having some success with it. So I think that's really impressive. I do want to continue and dig a little bit deeper on the middle and teacher leadership that you're having in schools. I know you've talked about it a little bit in terms of it adding to some of your membership. You had the 8-part series, which apparently has been exhausted by a number of folks, and they're looking for more and more. Tell us a little bit more about this middle and teacher leadership in schools. Where did it come from? What's the idea? Where is it going?
I'll say one thing about it, then I think Sarah might be able to speak to it better, if you don't mind. I would say through the pandemic, we've learned that teacher leadership is foundational to a school success. Teachers are doing more than they have ever done before, and oftentimes have been put in a position where they don't feel comfortable always, or they want to do even better than they're already doing. So with the increased or heightened role of teachers in the everyday work of a school campus, much like what I'm doing right now on my campus here in Vienna, Austria, we have been meeting those needs by extending and growing this program that has been around for a while. But we've got some outstanding facilitators and some really dynamite instruction that goes around it. And I think then I can ask Sarah to add a little bit to it, but I know the need is there. And so we're so excited to meet that need.
Yeah, I think you've described that very well, Jim. We do have a number of courses in the directions of leading and developing teams, quality teachers, design thinking, which Jim works with, where he's talking about design thinking and leading change, assessment, leadership, embracing conflict, culture of leadership, these various different areas that we're also expanding those courses in the coming year. And one of the areas that I think is becoming more and more interesting to observe is people's need for being able to look at some of these areas before they go into middle leadership. Often we'll ask at the beginning of the courses, so how much training did you do in order to be able to be put into your position as head of department, head of year, head of middle years, head of primary? It's quite shocking how little training people have been offered before being given a position. They're a good teacher, so they're put into a position, and how helpful it is to be given some of the tools for their toolbox before they move into that position, rather than having to look back on it retrospectively. And so I think what we're trying to roll out, and we're doing a pretty good job of, in partnership with TES, for example, we're offering graduate teacher training for people who are not yet teachers but are in schools and want to be able to increase their qualification, right the way through middle leadership, where we have these very, very strong courses that are so in demand, and then through to school leadership, so that there's the whole trajectory there for educators to be able to feel more confident in some of the really important aspects of the work that they do.
Maybe one of the follow-up questions I want to ask, and I know ECIS is not the only organization that struggles with it. Schools themselves struggle with it, which is that you put out professional development, you put out training to support teachers, And a lot of times where it stops is asking about perceptions about the training. I liked it. I felt good. I would do it again. But then we sometimes miss the boat on actually looking at where does it actually move the needle in terms of organizational effectiveness, student learning, student outcomes. So can you talk a little bit about the trainings which appear to be really well received? How are you looking or thinking about the effect that it may have on actual students and their learning?
Go on, Kam.
So one of the key questions we always ask ourselves is, what we are doing, is this enhancing the lives of students? And one of the reasons we're not doing that silver bullet PD is because if I'm doing a course and we're all trainers, we all participate and take and do training on certain courses, we will keep in touch with people. And if Sarah says she's going to do a thing, I'll go back and say, you know, Sarah, when you took the course, you said you were going to do this. How far are you on that journey? You know, we will offer that continuum of learning. So you just don't go away and you're set free to use these tools. We will check back with you. And, you know, some of our facilitators for our middle leader courses will write to delegates sort of every couple of months, check in with them. And it's about that. And also the school leaders are committed for them to do, you know, this work. So they will connect with them too. And what we will also start doing is visiting more of our member schools. That's very powerful. So I've been visiting a few schools and they'll come up to us and they'll go, I really enjoyed that webinar. And the lady that said this, I've done this with. You know, there's always that opportunity to connect and keep moving things along.
So specific to the middle years, for example, with the middle years courses, we have 2 facilitators who have monthly webinars so that people that have been part of the course are able to, it's voluntary, they don't have to, but they can come every month. And there's another 1-hour webinar where they focus on whatever the subject is for that month. We have one timed at the end of the day in the European clock so that it can include that time zone, and we have another early in the morning in the European clock so that it can include more people on Asian times in schools and on Asian time zones, so that they're continuing that involvement with one another. And then we also have a very I think a very useful feedback at the end of the courses, which really gives us some detailed indicators as to what's working well and what's not working well.
Yeah. And one of the other things that we haven't mentioned, actually, Wallace, is our special interest groups. So we have an army of world-class educators that come together in special interest groups, and then they roll out learning with all the people that are doing that in their field, like our multilingual language group. When they do a conference, 450 people attend, you know, and that really brings all that together. And then they become their own group with people like Susan Stewart that leads that group. And then they will all keep that work going. So it's not just ECIS that keeps that work going. We've got so many people we work with, they all keep working within those groups. And, you know, these people we have strong connections with. So somebody that spoke at our multilingual conference then applied for a university grant and was being supported by someone. And we gave our university grant to a young lady that's been living in a refugee camp. But we didn't just give her the grant. I probably speak to her every month. She called me with her grades quite recently. We sent her a little gift to say, well done. The lady that got it the year before, she's just written to me for a reference. So we'll keep in close contact with the people that we support.
Right, right. Thank you for sharing that. Relationships are just so crucial, and that's what it's all about. As we conclude, there's one more topic that I really wanted to pick your brains about, and that's DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. It seems to be the last couple of years have really shown a light on some of these issues affecting our communities, affecting our schools. And we've also become to realize in international education that international schools have their own set of particular circumstances around diversity, equity, and inclusion that really need to be perhaps discussed and talked about a little bit more. We've seen a flurry of different things come out, such as trainings and webinars and statements of that sort. I'm curious to know, what has ECIS done? What is ECIS planning to do? And what is ECIS's responsibility as one of the leaders in international education on this issue?
Kam has to answer this one because Kam's the inspiration behind what we're doing, and
Yeah.
she's all about moving this forward. So Kam, go for it.
Okay. Do jump in, because I know you two are doing a lot of work on this too. So I'm the first person of colour to be head of any of the associations globally, and hopefully I won't be one of the last. There'll be many more to follow. And what we're doing with our schools is we're offering them support. So we're not just doing, this is the training, here you go. They'll come to us and they'll say, well, actually, can you connect us with somebody that can do this training? Or we need this particularly in our school. That's what we're doing. And also, we did a whole conference last year on diversity and belonging. And I did get pushback. People were like, you can't do a whole conference about this. And we actually did. We had 500 participants and just outstanding feedback. And our work continues. So this conference, we've got a diversity and belonging dinner that will happen, and we have pledge cards. So we're talking to schools all the time, and we're saying, we've talked a lot about what the issues are. We want you all to move to action. You know, those little ripples is what will bring systemic change. When you call something out, you say, actually, I don't really think that you should say that, or we shouldn't be putting that on our website. So we're approaching it in as many directions as we can. So we have a course on inclusive recruitment. So we're talking to schools about, what does your shop window look like? Why are you not getting any candidates with a diverse background apply? And when they arrive here, are you making them belong? Or are they just feeling like I'm here because they needed that diverse candidate? So we're doing those things, and we continue this work with lots and lots of people. And what we also say with this work is it's collaborative. We will do it with any association that wants to be involved. We're not saying this is what ECIS does, because we all have to do this work together. And what do we really want? What's the final goal? So for us, it's everybody having access to the same opportunities, regardless of the colour of your skin, where you've been to school, and all those things.
Or what your gender identity is, or and I think the important thing there is that we're going the journey together, and we're all on the journey, and we get things wrong, and we get back on the horse, and we say, right, okay, let's try it again. One of our courses that has been really extraordinarily impactful and I think just permission giving for everybody, was a course that was specifically around child protection, but with a cultural sensitivity, in that it was led by somebody in Qatar, a Qatari Dr. Jahara Altani, who was able to help people from that whole part of the world, Qatari schools in Qatar, but also in surrounding countries, on some of the legal issues, some of the perception issues, some of the moral and ethical issues, that surround child protection and safeguarding in a context which, British and American teams coming in may not be aware of. And so really exposing or expanding opportunities for some quite challenging conversations. And I think that's another aspect of what we do, is that we're trying to move out of the sort of comfort zone, and push out, stretch to our edges.
What would you say, is just a follow-up question? I've talked to a lot of international school educators, and what they say is, yeah, we've had a lot of statements, we've had a lot of training, we've had a lot of conversations, but by and large, international schools are still out there saying, hey, we've got X number of kids from Y number of countries, so we're diverse. And if you look at the leadership ranks in international schools and international organizations, they largely still look the same. And so a lot of people out there are saying, yeah, we've had a lot of training and statements, but we're not really seeing the needle move very much. And in fact, maybe an organization like ECIS that's been around that long, maybe they're part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I know that's maybe a tough question, but how would you respond to that?
I want to promote Kam a little bit in this instance, because I'm glad that's a pointed like a needle, and I love it. And Wallace, you and I, after one of an episode that was filmed, I think you and I chatted for a while after a SchoolRubric event.
Right.
And this was a very important and personal thing to you and I. You and I both identify as non-white, and we both wondered about the industry that we're in. And I remember that conversation vividly, because I think you wondered when was the day that an organization would truly shift and change. And then I met Kam, and we started working more closely together. And then I got a chance to work here. And Kam, your bravery is unbelievable. The things you're willing to say out loud and press and push and move on. And so to watch Kam completely rebuild ECIS from the inside out, and our relationships together, how we trust each other in this organization, how we can speak open and freely, and how we can really push each other to be better, means that same work we're doing internally, we're doing with our partner schools, with all of our contacts, with people on Twitter, in every course. This entire thing is being built from the inside out in the vision that Kam has, and we're working every day to make that happen. It is truly phenomenal work, but it is also not easy, again, like anything else that we've been asked to do. So as we work our way through it and we change what we're doing, every day I can look back and say we are a truly different organization that is leading the change and not causing the problem. And for me, this allows me to see one really neat takeaway from it is a friend of mine who's a teacher. We both identify as Mexican American. He's never seen himself in leadership in international schools until now. And he wants to go to the ECIS leadership conference and start to exercise that part of himself in his late 40s, because he never thought that there was a genuine path for himself before Black Lives Matter, and now sees himself as a part of a solution in an industry where he was the victim of the consequences before. And so the fact that he wants and will be attending the leadership conference, to me, is a note that people who identify as people of color or anything else, gender, sexual identity, anything, they're latching onto our message and they're taking it. And a lot of that has to do with Kam taking this role and making it meaningful. So thank you, Kam, for that. I know Sarah and I really appreciate what you've done.
Kam, I feel like I have to turn it over to you for some last words as we close out, because Jim has really endorsed your leadership, and so I'm learning a lot about ECIS, and really thankful that someone like you is in this role, willing to venture forward and say some things. What is your vision and your thoughts?
So my vision is really to leave things better than when I found them, and also, I always say to everyone, we have to include everyone. I don't want the white male leaders to think there isn't a place for them. So at our last conference, we got them to do a workshop and say, this is how we'll support you in moving leadership and changing it for people of color or people with different sexuality, all the diversity that we think about, to be truly inclusive. But we have to include everyone in the work. And what we do at ECIS, we do with kindness and thoughtfulness. And actually, it's okay to make a mistake. I've been on lots of webinars where people say, oh, my goodness, I shouldn't have said that. Say what you need to, but somebody will say, actually, maybe that's not the most appropriate way of saying it. Let's say it like this, or let's frame it like this. There's lots of work still to be done, Wallace. And I'm really aware of that. My parents were immigrants to this country, and I went to school not speaking English. So I also speak to lots of students, and I say, I was you. I came here, I couldn't speak the language. So you can do anything you choose to. Just put in the hard work and do the best you can. So it's really important for me that I call myself an activist, and I truly believe I am. So I'll check CVs for students and get them jobs as well. We've all got to do what we can with what we have. And that's why at the conference, we're going to get people to make those pledges. We've talked a lot about the things that are wrong, but we can all make a little bit of an influence that will really move this along. That's how the needle will shift. And, when things are wrong, we need to be able to say that. I've called a school and I've said, why aren't you interviewing this teacher? And they said, oh, it's because she's not an English speaker. And I said, well, English isn't my first language either. Would you not give me an interview? And I didn't get they didn't interview the teacher, but actually next time they do it, hopefully they will think about it a little bit more carefully. And it's about those sort of things. And that's what ECIS is all about. We're about our community. We're about our connections. And if we say we're going to do a thing, we're going to do it.
Right. Well, Kam, that's a wonderful way to end. And I want to appreciate you for your courage and bravery. And I just want to really call out having an activist, someone like you in your role pushing forward may be the thing that international schools need to be able to move forward. So again, I want to thank my colleagues, my friends, Kam, Sarah, and Jim from ECIS. Thank you for being here and sharing some of the amazing work that you're doing, where you've been, where you are, and where you are going. For folks who want to learn a little bit more, they can go to their website at ecis.org. And remember, subscribe to SchoolRubric and visit us at schoolrubric.org to check out some of our content. So again, Kam, Sarah, Jim, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Wallace. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Wallace.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching and learning with us at SchoolRubric with educators from across the globe. For more access to articles, magazines, podcasts, live episodes, our international school directory, courses, and more, visit us at schoolrubric.org. Thank you.